Oh, welcome one and all. Massive turnout again for one of our Ocean Protect webinars, and it gives me great a pleasure to introduce my esteemed colleague, Mr. Daniel Ryder, who is our water sensitive urban design specialist at Ocean Protect. He has done a lot of amazing work in this space to get the framework to where it is today, as have a whole bunch of individuals and organisations. Daniel will give me the figures, and I'm sure I'll get them wrong, but I think it's like about 130 individuals across
Individuals, yeah.
about 87
Yep.
organisations. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Daniel. So take it away, Daniel.
Thanks, Brad, for the introduction, and thanks to the over 300 people that have registered for today's webinar. Really good to see so many people interested and wanting to learn about this project, but also to improve WSUD maintenance compliance in Australia. Before we go any further, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we are all on today and their continuous connection to land and sea. I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present. Before I also go any further, I do just want to put the disclaimer here that I recognize and acknowledge that Ocean Protect does have a conflict of interest around the topic of improving WSUD maintenance, as we are a company that supplies, installs, and maintains these assets. And I'm an employee of Ocean Protect, so that does apply to me and the work I've been doing. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, there's a lot of information to share today, a lot to go through, and so I'm going to do my best to keep this as short as possible. It's probably going to go for about half an hour of me talking, and then we'll be open up for Q&A. Today's presentation is kind of separated into three sections, giving a bit of context around the situation, then going into what the framework is and kind of giving some detail and information around that, and then also just talking about the future of this project and kind of what's next and what you can kind of do with this. And so yeah, you can chuck in any questions you have in the Q&A feature and we can answer that at the end of this presentation. And so in terms of the situation, we've estimated that there would be over 500,000 assets, WSUD assets being installed that have been installed across Australia. Ocean Protect have installed nearly 70,000, and there are many other companies that supply and install these assets. So 500,000 would be probably a conservative estimate of how many there could be. And the issue is that these assets are not being maintained. And so that is causing a whole range of consequences, which I'll get into on another slide. But there's a lot of work that has been done in this space to understand how much maintenance is being done. There was an audit done by the Parramatta River Catchment Group in 2022, which found that 20% of assets were being maintained. This was according to the actual asset owners. So it could probably be a little bit less than that, and maybe more in line with the number I hear more frequently, which is about a 5 to 10% of assets actually being maintained properly. Now, in terms of why this is happening, there's a lot of reasons as to why this is, and these are just some of it and some of the things that I've been keeping in mind when developing this project and leading this project. But there's a lack of funding, so councils have limited funds that they can put towards improving the management of their own assets, their public assets, but also looking at the enforcing actual maintenance on private assets as well. So funding is something to consider. With that, there's also capacity. So there's only so many people, so much capacity people have to do their job, and councils are responsible for a lot of things. And so that was another thing as to why maintenance might not be happening as good as it should be. A lack of understanding. I think something that needs to be improved upon is the understanding within the industry, but also the community around WSUD assets. So looking at what they are, where they are, what they need and why they need to be maintained and what their actual purpose is. So I think that can kind of really help improve maintenance. Also the interest with this, private assets aren't being maintained because they're not having compliance enforced upon them, while public assets are not being maintained as good as they could be because the community is not demanding that there be better stormwater management. So there's a bit of a cyclical thing here happening where there's not enough demand and interest to get this sort of work to happen. Another issue, I think, is the lack of standardization within the industry. There's different names for assets, there's different ways to do maintenance, different ways to do reporting, and all of these different requirements and ways to do things, which makes it very hard for organizations to do stuff across Australia, very difficult for asset managers, difficult for councils to know what to do because everyone's doing things differently. Now, the consequences of assets not being maintained. So there are environmental consequences. These assets are being put in place to protect the environment. And if they're not being maintained, they can't operate properly, which means there would be water quality issues, detention and flooding issues, and conservation issues. There's also economical consequences to think about. There's cleanup costs, there's reduced property value, there's cost around damaged infrastructure and missed job opportunities. There's social consequences to consider, the health and safety. These assets are protecting people from flooding. There's pollution that's being removed by these assets. So all of this is kind of looking towards that kind of, helping society and communities, making them healthier and safer. Now, as part of the WSUD Maintenance Compliance Framework, which I'll be getting into soon, there was a legislation review that we engaged some lawyers to do. We asked them some questions, and I'm not going to go into all of that today because there is quite a bit of information around that, but I will be doing a co-presenting a webinar at the end of May with one of the lawyers as part of that review and going through the actual findings from that review, their answers to the questions that I asked them around this. And so I'm just going to not be providing any legal advice today. It's just being provided for informational purposes. But this is kind of my summary and takeaway of what they found. So a lot of these assets are being put in place to prevent environmental harm. And so not maintaining WSUD assets could cause environmental harm, and environmental harm is illegal. Now, this will vary state by state and situation by situation, but there's legislation in place, whether that's a general environmental duty or some other clause or act that says that you need to be doing not harming the environment. But on top of that, there are also development conditions and covenants and agreements that could require private assets to be maintained. And then also for councils, they do need to consider the obligation and requirement they have as a regulatory authority to actually do this work to enforce maintenance, but also improve maintenance on their own assets. Now, getting into the actual framework, so for the people that don't know what it is, you can actually access it right now. There's a QR code in the top right-hand corner. It'll take you to a website and you can actually access it and have a look at it while I'm talking if you want. But basically, or after this talk, the framework is a package of information, resources, and tools that councils can use to implement and operate a WSUD maintenance compliance program. This is to help councils improve maintenance of private assets, but also there are elements of this that could help improve the management of public assets as well. And so in the following slides, I'll kind of go through each of these elements that make up this framework. So firstly, there is a guideline. It's about an 80-page document where there's 6 chapters and about half the document is the actual appendices. So in the first chapter, it's an introduction. It's introducing the topic, the framework, the guideline, and the relevant law, so people kind of understand the context needed for this project. The following 5 chapters are going through step by step the different processes being proposed within such a program. And so these outline and explain the activities and decisions that are displayed in the process map document. And then within the appendices, there's development conditions, there's information about WSUD system agreements and maintenance schedules. There's content that councils can use and extract from this and put into fact sheet templates, letter templates, and even reporting sheets as well. And so basically you can go into that guideline and take this and use this how you need. In terms of the process maps, it's a 7-page document. There's a cover page followed by 6 process maps. The cover page is just to kind of give you a bit of context about the document, but also the legend on that cover page is important because the symbology used within these process maps are based on a standard for process mapping called Unified Modeled Language. So bringing that into these process maps was an important part of doing this. So it makes it clear visually looking at these what they mean. And so I won't go through all of the 5 proposed processes, but I will kind of go through the high level process just so people understand what I'm proposing as a compliance program. So basically 5 proposed processes. At the start, there would either be a development process where development conditions are being imposed and enforced and getting them prepared to actually be maintained and occupied that property. And then there's the identification process, which is looking at existing properties with WSUD systems on them, identifying them and assessing if they can be included within the program. And once these properties and assets are ready for inclusion, they go into the operational process, which is where council welcomes them into the program, outlines the requirements they have, and then the property is supposed to maintain that property in accordance with their legal requirements. It is then proposed that once a year, so an annual compliance form is submitted. And so this is just basically saying that, yep, things are being maintained, everything's all good. And so that just keeps happening. And then at some point, council decides on whether they want to conduct an audit to actually assess compliance on the properties within the LGA. And so this decision point provides council's flexibility in terms of how frequently they want to do it, depending on their funding, capacity, resourcing, and what they're trying to achieve. Obviously, the more frequent that can be, the more accurate and more compliance there will be. However, the reality is some councils might not have the ability to do a monthly audit of some properties, an annual audit to every 2 years audit, or whatever it ends up being. But so that kind of provides that flexibility for there. Once it moves into the auditing process, this is where council's auditing to determine if it's compliant. It would start off with a desktop audit, and this is where council or someone on their behalf is reviewing evidence at the desk. So looking at data, looking at information, reports, and evidence that they have. And so with that, basically figuring out if it's compliant. If it's compliant, it will then move back into the operational process. However, if it's non-compliant, it would then go into a property audit. And this is where the auditor would actually go to the site, look at the assets and determine if they're compliant. And if it's compliant, again, move back into the operational process. However, if it's non-compliant, it would then move into the enforcement process, which is where council is actually enforcing compliance onto these properties. And so this could be issuing fines or pursuing other legal action. Now, in terms of the IMS, which is the abbreviation for an information management system, as part of this project, I realized that councils would need help understanding how to manage the information within the program. And so I've developed a mock-up system using some Microsoft products, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Outlook, and Microsoft Power Automate, basically to make a system demonstrating how I think the information data could be managed. And then councils can play around with this, make this work for them, and then take this to their internal IT teams or hire a consultant that could come in and update and improve their IT systems and internal processes so that they could replicate such a program, such a system. But basically, there is a bit of manual input into the Excel system by council or someone on their behalf. And so that's just some basic stuff about the property and the assets. Then there's the annual compliance form being submitted, which would send data into that Excel system. It would be stored there and analyzed by Excel. And then there would also be an automatic email sent to the person that submitted the report so that there is a confirmation email being like, we've received your data, and if there's any issues, we'll follow up with you. Now, in terms of that Excel system, there are kind of 7 sheets. And so there's the user guide, which is providing guidance and information about using the IMS. So kind of a high level sheet with high level information about the different sheets so people understand what it's all about. Then there's the property register, which is providing space for that high level info about the property. So the property address, contact details, and the compliance status. Then there's the asset register, which is providing the critical information about each of the different assets within the LGA. And so within that, there'd be asset IDs, there would be asset types, models, manufacturers, those sorts of details. And then there's the compliance form sheet. And so this is storing the annual compliance data from that compliance form being submitted. So the data would be sent to this form, to this sheet, and then that would then be sent and updating the compliance status showing on the property register. Then there's the work activity sheet, which is providing a list of all the potential assets and the work activities associated with them in the LGA. And basically a council could use this to review or create a maintenance schedule, because you can filter it for the specific assets that form part of a system on a property, and then that can kind of help with that process. And at the end, there is the IMS information sheet and the IMS setup sheet. And so those exist to provide a bit of guidance and help understanding the different components of this system, but also on how to set it up. Now, in terms of how you can use the framework, basically you can use it. You can go to the website right now and get access to it and implement it today if you really wanted to. you can modify it and you can build upon it, which were two important things for this project due to the fact that each organization does things differently, different states do things differently. It was important to kind of have this ability for councils to be able to modify it and build upon it to suit their needs. You can take inspiration if you really don't think that this framework is relevant to you. You can take inspiration, find stuff within it that would be relevant to you and use that. But also you could look at different ways of using it. So you could go down the route of what Blacktown City Council does in terms of having 2 dedicated officers for WSUD compliance, or you could go down the route of delegating the duties across the organization so that it's not just one person or one small team doing it. Alternatively, you could look down the route of hiring someone externally to come in and actually set this up and maybe potentially operate it for you if that would be appropriate. Now, how much does it cost? Ocean Protect have spent a lot of time and money developing this project. And a question I've had from some people is how much does it cost to access, to use it, all of that. And how much is Ocean Protect charging for it? But it's free. We're not charging anything for this. It's free. You can access it and use it as of today, right now, with no money coming to Ocean Protect or anything like that. Basically, there will be the costs later on of actual implementation, whether that's an internal cost or you hire someone externally to do that work, or the actual operation, there will be the cost of the staff and the resourcing. But to actually use this and access it, it's completely free. It's on the WSUD compliance website right now, and you can get it right now if you're interested. Now, why is this project important? It's providing guidance and operating programs, which I think is something that the industry has been struggling with for a long time. They don't know how to implement it. People have looked towards Blacktown City Council and they've done a great job in what they're doing. However, trying to replicate that's hard because councils don't know how Blacktown has done what they've done or how they could do their own version. So this project provides you some guidance on how you could create your own program that is different to Blacktown's, but it does help with the same sort of work. It will also save councils time, money, and resourcing. Ocean Protect have spent the time, the money, and the resourcing developing this. We've paid the lawyers, I've been paid, and others have been paid internally, and lawyers and everything to do this work so that you don't have to spend as much time, as much money, and as much resources towards implementing such a program. But also it can help create standardization with proposed conditions and processes and information. It can help create a bit more standardization across the industry in Australia, which I think is an important thing for people to consider. But also it can help the environment and communities. Besides from what it can do for an organization and for these assets being maintained properly and operating properly can help the environment and the communities that councils are trying to look after. Now, to date, we've received in-principle support from 4 organisations: Cooks River Alliance, Stormwater New South Wales, Stormwater Queensland, and Optimal Stormwater. And so basically these organisations have said that they do think this is a good idea and they're happy to put their name behind this project. And so they get listed on presentations like this and shown on our website as an in-principle supporter. And that's basically the bare minimum an in-principle supporter does. And if people are interested in providing this sort of support, you can reach out and I'm happy to have a chat and talk about what that could look like for your organization. So who has been involved in the development of this project? So it's been led and financed by Ocean Protect. So we are establishing this project with the intention to hand it off to another organization once it's established and we can find someone suitable to do this. We engaged Clayton Utz to do the legislation review and some of the legal work for this project. So they've done a lot of contribution for this. There's also an acknowledgement should be given to Benny Penaluric. I've known him for 5 years now. We've spent a lot of time talking about ideas and concepts, and we've even engaged him for a 2-week period, and he's helped here and there to kind of help develop and shape this project to where it is today. But also to help this project, I set up the National WSUD Compliance Network, which is a national network bringing together stakeholders from government to council, to manufacturers, to consultants, to catchment groups, and to other sorts of organizations as well. And so for those that don't know too much about that network, it is, to date, we've had 4 meetings and it's brought 130 organizations from 86 different 130 individuals from 86 different organizations. And so that's from across Australia. Predominantly that East Coast is where most people are coming from, but there are some more towards the West. So the purpose of this network is to discuss WSUD compliance. There's a bit more of a focus right now on maintenance compliance, but I would love to kind of see this expand into design compliance, construction compliance, and those other forms of compliance. Another element of setting this network up was to provide feedback on the framework to get people to share their thoughts, to share their experience, to share their struggles, and help improve this framework and this project so it can benefit councils and the industry. But also an important element was to hold the framework accountable and make it transparent. So as I said at the start with the disclaimer, there is a bit of a conflict of interest for Ocean Protect to be doing something in WSUD maintenance compliance space. However, this network provides an opportunity for the industry to hold the development of the project accountable, but also make it transparent by questioning why I'm doing things a certain way or why I'm not doing something a different way. So there's that opportunity for the industry in those meetings. Now, the framework has been developed for councils so that they can improve WSUD within the LGA, but others can benefit as well. So how can it benefit you? If you're anyone in the industry or in the community, it will benefit by helping create cleaner, healthier, safer community and environments. Basically, this project can lead to these assets being maintained and operating properly, which can help the communities and environments that councils are responsible for. If you're a council and regulator, there's environmental benefits, economic benefits, social benefits, and organizational benefits. It improves your environment. It can create more jobs within your LGA. It can help save you money. It can help protect your community that you're responsible for, and it can help improve organizational processes and systems and meeting the requirements you have as a regulatory regulator. If you're a consultant, you could look towards helping councils actually implementing and operating such programs, or you could look at helping them audit the assets. So that's another kind of service that consultants could be helping councils with. And if you're a maintenance provider like Ocean Protect or the many other within the industry, it can lead to increased maintenance services, meaning more work for companies. Now, in terms of why Ocean Protect have started this project, firstly, protecting the environment and community is something that we are really passionate about and we are trying to do. That's why we exist, to remove pollution from stormwater so it can lead to healthier waterways, healthier oceans, and protecting both of those. Then there's to help the industry. This has been an issue that the industry has been dealing with for a long time. And so this actually will help the industry solve this issue by improving maintenance of these assets. It will also lead to more maintenance contracts for us, but also any maintenance provider in the industry. So it's not just a benefit for us, but this will help all maintenance providers, leading to more work for them, but also no one else is. Now, there are organizations such as Blacktown City Council that have been doing maintenance compliance, and there's organizations such as Parramatta River Catchment Group just about to start implementing such programs. However, there's no one really providing the guidance needed for the industry to do this. And so that's why we are doing this, and we do a lot of things like this to kind of help the industry, because that's what we want to do. No one else is doing it, so we can help. We have the ability and we want to do that. Now, just for some clarity, because I have had questions around this before, but Ocean Protect will not be enforcing compliance with this. We provide the information to councils and they operate the programs themselves. We have nothing to do with the actual compliance. We're not accessing any confidential data or information, so no commercial advantage. We provide you that information and instructions on how you can do the program, and then you operate it yourself. And we're not pushing proprietary assets. We're not saying what assets you should or should not use. There's other things in the industry for that. What this is about is helping you improve maintenance so that these assets, regardless of what they are actually getting maintained and operating properly. Now, what are the challenges for this project? So today, there have been some barriers and hurdles that I've had to jump through, and some things that I'm sure will be coming up in the future when I'm trying to help councils implement this. Firstly, uptake is something that I have seen as a bit of a challenge and will see as a challenge going forward, is councils actually uptaking this. So with that in mind, I've done what I can to kind of reduce the capacity, resourcing, and funding needed to do such a program, and looking to find ways to improve that as well going forward. The perception around Ocean Protect leading this project can be an issue for some, as some people have thoughts about Ocean Protect as a company. However, I've done what I can to remove it being an Ocean Protect thing. If you look at the guideline, I've removed the branding from the front cover. There's no Ocean Protect there. Looking at the photos within it, we've got competitor assets in it. We've got non-proprietary assets and a small amount of Ocean Protect assets in there. And so I've done what I can to really reduce that perception issue. But also the scale. When I was at Blacktown City Council, it was easy to kind of improve their program because I understood the challenges, I understood the people. But with this project, I'm actually looking at helping councils across Australia, which is a much larger area with different approaches and requirements. So that's the challenge that I've had to kind of keep in mind. And that's why that flexibility is really important, and modification with this project is important so that people can make it meet their needs. Now, the future of this project. So what is the timeline? Now, the timeline of this project can change very rapidly, but this is kind of what I'm working towards right now. Just the nature of this project means it can change fairly quick. But what I'm seeing right now is we're in stage 1 of this project, which is to develop a kind of a draft model and kind of come to agreement with the industry on that model. And so that part 1 of this stage has just been finished. And now we've moved into a 4-month consultation period where the industry can provide their feedback and thoughts on those information, resources, and that model, which will then help move into that second stage, which is to help develop the assistance to implement that model. So I would develop bits and pieces for that, bring that back to the industry, go through another consultation period and be like, what are your thoughts on this? Do you need more? What do you think? And then following that, it would move into stage 3, which is about implementing the framework, implementing these programs, and then improving the framework. So it's a continuously improving project that can receive feedback at any point in time and be updated and help councils that way. And so councils can implement it, and then looking at other ways to help councils. And so I would love to also see this expand and go down the route of design compliance and construction compliance and the other forms of compliance within the life cycle of WSUD assets, so that there can actually be true compliance happening within a life cycle of WSUD assets. Now, in terms of what you can do, you can use it. You can get it right now and start using it whenever you're ready. You can review it and provide feedback to really help the industry, for it to meet your needs and to meet others' needs. If you can review it and provide any sort of feedback, that would be appreciated and very helpful. You could provide in-principle support. If you think that this is a good project and that it will help you or help others, you can get your organization's name behind this as an in-principle supporter. You could also look to contribute if you're interested in partnering or finding a way to contribute in a greater capacity. There's also that opportunity. You can attend the network meetings, come along, ask questions, provide feedback, challenge me on the way I'm doing things, and spread the word. Today, there's over 300 people that have registered for this webinar, and I'm sure there are many others in the industry that are aware of it. However, there are still a lot that probably aren't aware of it and what it actually is and the benefits of it. So by telling others about this, that can help improve this project and also help you with this project. And so what's the catch? We're giving you a free project worth a lot of money, and surely there'll be a catch, but there is none. We're not asking for anything in return. We're just giving you this for free. You can use it and do what you want with it. And hopefully you would provide a little bit of feedback so we can improve it for people like you. However, there's no hidden agenda, no hidden catch around this. You can use it as of right now and do what you want with it, basically. Now, just to note, there are some upcoming events that might be of interest to you as we've kind of finished most of the webinar now. But basically, if you're interested in WSUD, Brad Dalrymple will be doing a webinar on May 22nd as part of the Stormwater Fundamental series, which already has over 300 registrations about WSUD. At the end of May, I will also be doing a webinar with the lawyer about law and order, commenting and providing those findings from that legislation review. There will also be Stormwater Victoria conference at the start of June. I'll be presenting there and be down there, so happy to talk to people there. Evan, there's the next National WSUD Compliance Network meeting at the end of June, and there are more events to come. If you're interested in staying up to date with upcoming events, you can sign up to the Ocean Protect newsletter at oceanprotect.com.au/newsletter. But basically, we're looking to set up more events going forward to really give the industry the opportunity to get involved with this project and provide that consultation and feedback. And so that's the end of today's presentation. We're about to go into Q&A and Brad will facilitate that. But if you're interested in talking after today, you can email me, you can call me, you can reach out via LinkedIn, and you can access the framework today. Thanks everyone for coming along, and I'll hand it over to Brad now.
Cool. Thank you, Daniel, and well done. Bang on 30 minutes. So a lot of content there. A lot of questions have already come through. And just a reminder, folks, if you do have any questions you'd like to ask Daniel today, please put those questions in the Q&A. Obviously, you can reach out to Daniel personally, and I know a lot of people already have. But if you do have something you'd like to talk about or ask Daniel today, please do so. We've had already a bunch of questions come through, and I'm just basically just going to go through them one by one. First up, Daniel, Greg Chian from Cleaner Stormwater asks, how do we access the free WSUD compliance documents?
Yep. So this QR code at the bottom right corner will take you there right now. You can also search the URL wsudcompliance.com.au/resources. It will take you to a web page, and on that web page, you fill in your name, your organization, and email, and then you should receive an automatic email straight away with a link to the documents, and you can access it from there. If you don't get the email, please let me know, or if you have an issue with the link, let me know.
Cool. Another question from Peter Chambers. Peter is from Muswellbrook Council in New South Wales. Peter asks, for external auditors and assessors in maintenance compliance, such as cleaning contractors, have they been formally or informally inducted into this system, and have their systems/methods changed as a result for asset maintenance?
So this project has only just kind of released, so it hasn't made the changes in the industry as of yet. I do think it can kind of help improve asset maintenance by kind of creating a bit more of a standardization around it. However, as of right now, I would say no, it hasn't really done that yet.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be dependent on councils taking it up and requiring it as well, or sort of implementing it. Thank you, Peter. Question from Ronald Klein from Topo on the Sunshine Coast. Ronald asks, the framework looks great, but seems a costly exercise for councils to implement. Are there any councils keen to implement this on the ground, or is it still a cost issue?
Yeah, so I think cost is probably going to be the biggest issue. As I raised, that's probably going to be one of the barriers to uptake. And so with that being the case, I'm doing everything I can to make this as cheap as possible and as efficient and as automated as possible. So you're reducing the amount of money, resource, and capacity you needed to actually implement it. Yes, there is going to be a cost implementing and operating it. There's no way to avoid that. That's how the world works. But I'm doing what I can to reduce the costs. And if people can tell me where those costs are coming from, I can try and see what I can do to reduce it. But there will be a point where there will be a cost, and councils will just have to realize that is something they will need to spend money on, because there is a legal obligation to be doing this sort of work.
Cool. Another question from Ailey Silkman from the City of Sydney.
Yep.
And no pressure, Daniel, but when will the final framework be made available?
So this framework is going to be a very continually evolving project, and there's never, in my mind, there's never going to be an end to it. At the moment, the consultation period is until August 19th, so that was going to give a 4-month period for people to look at it and provide some feedback. Then I go into that refining the process and then looking at what would be needed to implement that model. And then through the implementation of this framework by councils, so maybe by next year, councils can have some sort of version with some help of implementation. And then, but it will continually evolve by bringing in more ideas, more things that can be added to help councils. So sometime next year, I'm hoping to have a bit more of an updated, more final version, but there's never going to be a finished product. It will just continually evolve.
Good times. Zach DeRay from LCI Consultants in Sydney. Zach asks, I take it Zach's a civil engineer. Zach asks, is a civil engineer required to create a management plan based on the stormwater design for the plot of land? And they also ask, it would be good to understand from an upfront civil engineer design perspective what to look for to make designs easier / cheaper to maintain to keep the pollution reduction capabilities.
Yeah. So as part of what I'm proposing with this program, with this framework, is that as part of the development process, a maintenance schedule would be developed for the full WSUD system, so all of the assets on the property. And so whether that's a civil engineer or someone else, someone would be doing that. And the council should be kind of providing a bit of guidance on what's required for that, the frequencies and that sort of stuff. However, within this framework, there is also a fact sheet which actually provides a bit of help for development applications around installing these assets and actually implementing it. So that could also be helpful for those people.
Cool. Peter Chambers asks again, through Stormwater New South Wales / Australia, has there been any advocacy for increased funding opportunities for council to ensure ongoing maintenance in increasing WSUD assets?
Actually, going back to the question before, because I just realized I forgot something,
Oh, yeah.
but the second part of it about whether there's things that designers can do to improve to help maintenance long term. Hopefully with this framework, I can go down that route of providing that information around what they can do. If at this current moment, probably the best thing to do would be to talk to the associations or the actual people manufacturing these assets and providing them and figuring out what should be considered in the implementation of those in part of designs, thinking about access and all of that, which is a really key factor and a barrier to some maintenance happening.
Cool.
Going to Peter Chambers' question. So I know there is talks in Stormwater New South Wales at the moment about looking at trying to increase the stormwater management service charge. So that is something that could be happening. I'm not involved in that, so I don't know too much about it. But I know that's going to happen. And I do think hopefully with this project, I can also be someone that can advocate for this. Because I've worked in government, I can understand the financial barriers and obstacles that they're facing. And so that's something I do want to help because that will help improve the implementation and use of these programs.
Yeah, look, you might have heard, we released a podcast chat with Murray Powell, who's Vice President of Stormwater New South Wales. And this is one of the things we talked about is Stormwater New South Wales are very active in trying to increase that stormwater service management charge and also allowing more of it to be used for maintenance. So if you're keen to find out more about that, Peter, I'd highly recommend reaching out to Murray Powell. I'm happy to send you his contact details if you don't have them already. Asad Suman asks, I submitted an expression of interest a couple of weeks ago, but haven't received a framework or any reply yet. Could you please check that the system is working okay?
Yeah. So Asad, I did see your name come through, so I do think it is working. It might have just gone to your junk if you haven't seen it yet, but I can also look into getting this to you after this.
Cool, great. Chris Manning, I think Chris is at Water Sensitive Cities now. Greetings, Chris. Thanks for coming along. Formerly a Townsville Regional Council back in the day for a long time. Chris asks, does the compliance framework include an asset condition assessment / audit to inform the maintenance regime? And secondly, will the IMS collect cost information related to the maintenance?
Yeah, so with that, I might bring questions over so I can see it better. But so in the appendices, I do provide some mock-up sheets of how you could be doing reporting on kind of asset condition. So whether that's a good, moderate, or poor condition asset. And I do think that can help influence the maintenance regime, so increase or decrease frequencies of certain activities. So I do think it's not necessarily included, but it is something that councils can do with the framework. And within these programs, because I do think some assets, depending on their location and context, are going to require more frequent maintenance than what might be stated by councils or by other authorities. So there should be that flexibility. And so with that cost information, that is something I would like to add at some point. And I do know Water Sensitive Cities had their webinar yesterday about the life cycle cost and attended that, and it was a good webinar, and people should go listen to that if they're interested in the cost around these assets. But at the moment, it's not really something I've included for the IMS. I've had to keep it very kind of fundamental and basic, with the idea being that councils could add such things. They can add dashboards, they can add more fields and columns. And so that those councils then can collect that data if that is something they want to collect. I recommend it is something you should try and move towards. However, depending on the context, it might not be something that they can do. And so I didn't include it, but it is something you could add yourself.
Yeah, and just a shout out to Chris, because I know they're looking for life cycle cost information at water sensitive cities in relation to WSUD assets. So if you do have data that you've got that you could provide, please reach out to Chris. Chris, FYI, we obviously know how much our assets cost exactly, so happy to share that information. We're also, Ocean Protect, are doing a separate exercise, separate to this framework, around how much do various WSUD assets cost. So I'll reach out to you separately about that. Greg Chan asks also, do you have any information, do you have more information about the integrated management system and how it makes it easy for councils to implement the framework in an automated manner without significant resource investment?
Yeah, so the thing is, again, this is a mock-up system, so it's showing how a system could be operating. So whether existing systems exist in the industry, they could exist already, and councils could go and get the licensing or purchasing or getting access to free, because I'm sure some are free out there that could do something like that. However, what I've kind of gone down the route of is develop this mock-up showing that you should be automating it. You have the data being input into a database, a register, whatever you want to kind of call it. And then you have that compliance data being submitted automatically into that to influence compliance status so that you can determine if you need to do any compliance actions. So it's kind of about trying to automate it, and we'll show how that is. But the thing is, it's going to vary council by council on how it improves things for them. But that, yeah, IMS is trying to integrate, bring things together, make it as automated as possible, as simple as possible, so that councils are not filling in paper forms, receiving that, and having to enter that into some field on some system that's not connected to another system. It's just trying to bring everything together and make it automated.
Cool. Yeah. Kieran Coogan from Liverpool City Council asks, do you have any key tips for starting a compliance with limited resources? I think that's probably the question from every council staff member's perspective.
Yeah, well, I think it's like I would suggest having a look at this framework just to kind of get an understanding of what you could be doing, and then trying to figure out the appetite of your council, because some councils might be interested in doing what Blacktown City Council done and has gone for a range of different types of asset types: rainwater tanks, gross pollutant traps, pit inserts, fire retention, and all of that. Or you could go down the route of just having a program that is just looking at rainwater tanks. You could have it just look at OSD, and you could expand from that, or you just stay at that because of how limited your resources are. So you can kind of think about what your priorities are as an organization, look at the strategies and the plans and policies that you've got publicly saying to the community, this is what we're going to do for the environment, and consider that. So really thinking about what your organization is trying to do and what you're capable of doing, and figuring out the potential opportunities for that.
And without dropping Daniel into more work, Kieran, my suggestion would be to reach out to Daniel. I'm sure he'd be happy to help. So the framework obviously is very, very good for could be widely applied to a whole bunch of different councils, but there's going to be site-specific or council-specific challenges. I think Daniel would be very well placed to assist in those regards. So.
Yeah. Like I had a meeting earlier this week with a council from South Australia who was interested in trying to implement this framework on the public kind of assets. And so I sat down with them and just kind of talked through how that could be applicable for their situation and how they could use it. So I would be happy to sit down with you at some point to talk that through.
Cool. And comment from Peter Chambers. He says, comment for group, it is worth asking for the final product drawing for any installed proprietary systems for asset management. Yeah, fair call. And I think that goes for all WSUD assets, Peter. But obviously, if you ever need a design drawing for an Ocean Protect asset, just feel free to reach out to us directly as well. Cool. A lot of people saying thank you, well done, awesome work, Daniel, all that sort of good stuff. So I'll probably put out a final call out for final questions if you have any, but I guess the overwhelming message is also if you like to discuss further or ask any other questions following on from today. Obviously, Daniel's been good enough to provide his contact details there. So I'd encourage everyone, if they're keen to talk further with Daniel, just reach out, give him a call.
Thanks everyone for coming along, and talk soon, and let's work together and get this issue solved for the industry.
Cool. And a big shout out to Daniel Ryder for all his work that he's put into it. Well done, Daniel. Great stuff.
Thank you, Brad.
Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Thanks, everyone.